With Car Guru's Discover, you can skip the filters and describe what you're looking for in your own words. Simply type what you want, and Car Guru's Discover instantly surfaces real listings that match your exact needs. It's no wonder Car Gurus is the #1 most visited car shopping site according to SimilarWeb's estimated traffic data. Buy or sell your next car today with Car Gurus at CarGurus.com. Go to CarGurus.com to make sure your big deal is the best deal. That's CarGurus.com. CarGurus.com.
And away we go. Episode 1260 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Friday, February 13th, 2026. It is Friday the 13th. It is the day before Valentine's Day, what will be the 25th anniversary of one of the most famous losses in Maryland basketball history. February 14th, 2001, Valentine's Day night, 2001, a 74-71 loss to Florida State at Cole Fieldhouse in College Park, Maryland. Then Terrapins head coach Gary Williams and his team got booed off the court. Yes, booed off the court at home. What was the team's 5th loss in 6 games. I was there. I was at Cole Fieldhouse that night broadcasting the game for the mighty student radio station, WMUC. This was a low point for Gary Williams as Maryland head coach. But then he did, as he tended to do, he figured it out. Maryland ended its regular season with 5 consecutive wins and made the Final Four for the first time in program history. Hello and welcome to this Friday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. On this episode of the podcast, have not one but 2 guests for you. Next segment, a conversation with a good friend of this podcast, Washington Commanders analyst and former Washington Redskins tight end Logan Paulsen. This is the first of 2 conversations that we're having with Logan about the team's new offensive coordinator David Blough and new defensive coordinator Durante Jones. We, in this conversation, next segment, are going to focus on the team planning on having more under center snaps for quarterback Jayden Daniels. I find this topic fascinating. We, with Logan, are going to do a deep dive on the Commanders wanting more under center snaps for Daniels, including why this is the case, the adjustment for Daniels in going to more under center snaps, the pros and cons to being under center versus the shotgun and pistol formations, so whether David Blough wants Daniels running less or just running smarter, and what changes for the Commanders' offensive line with not just David Blough now as offensive coordinator, but also Darnell Stapleton now as offensive line coach. And then after a conversation with Logan Paulsen, we'll discuss the state of the Washington Wizards rebuild at the 2026 NBA All-Star break, as we'll speak with Greg Finberg, staff editor for Bullets Forever and the host of the Wizards podcast. Greg is terrific at talking Wizards. Before we get to feedback, news from 2026 Baltimore Orioles spring training in Sarasota, Florida. And the news is not good. The O's on Thursday afternoon announced that second baseman Jackson Holliday on Thursday underwent surgery to address a fractured hamate bone in his right wrist. He is expected to miss at least the first few weeks of the regular season. Terrible news for the O's. Exactly what they did not need off back-to-back injury-plagued seasons. And this news is a buzzkill off the exciting news on Wednesday night reports that the O's have agreed with free agent starting pitcher Chris Bassett on a 1-year, $18.5 million contract. You know, the O's since the end of last season have handed out a reported $213.5 million in guaranteed money in signing and re-signing free agents. This team is spending like never before. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Email from Thomas Murphy on this podcast. Writes Thomas, "Hey Al, was hanging out with my guys bowling last week when the Washington Post sports demise came up. These guys are all in their early 70s, and like you had been reading the Post since grade school, I told them to check out your podcast as you cover in detail the teams that these guys all love and follow. I'm assuming the local sports info vacuum created by the Post shuttering the sports department will be an opportunity for others to be at least heard. All the best, Murph." Well, thank you very much for that, Murph. I appreciate Murph spreading the word. The 2 best things that you can do to support this podcast: A, supporting our sponsors and letting them know that you're using them because of this podcast. B, spreading the word, letting other people know about the podcast. This podcast is true independent media. I do not have the platform of, ESPN or some other television network or some other giant media company like Barstool Sports or some radio station propping up this podcast. This podcast is true independent media. This podcast is like an underground renegade militia, and you are a big part of the militia, and I thank you for being a big part of the militia. And one of the reasons that on this podcast discuss the teams of the Washington, D.C. area as I do is that nobody else is doing this. There is no other podcast. There is no radio show. There is no television show. There is no YouTube show. There is no traditional print outlet. There is no digital print outlet that covers the teams of the D.C. area like this podcast does, period. We talk Washington Commanders on every episode of the podcast, no matter the time of year, and we talk about the other major teams of the D.C. area in terms of discussing each team on the episode after each team's regular season and postseason game. Washington Nationals, Baltimore Orioles, Washington Capitals, Washington Wizards, Maryland football and Maryland basketball, Georgetown basketball, Navy football, Virginia Tech football and Virginia Tech basketball, Virginia football and Virginia basketball, and much more. Like you look at the Caps, we don't just talk Caps once in a while. We talk Caps on the episode of the podcast after each Caps regular season and postseason game. And the same is true for all of those other teams. This, to me, is part of where the Washington Post sports section went wrong, lessening coverage of local teams and increasing coverage of national sports topics / issues. This podcast, which is coming up on its 5-year anniversary, has been happy to pick up the slack. And as is always the case, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. And a special thank you to people like Murph who spread the word. Email from Rich on the Commanders having had a bad defense in each of their 2 seasons with Dan Quinn as head coach. Writes Rich, Al, I was reading through an article about how the Commanders defense requires a complete reset. Didn't we hire a defensive head coach? Wouldn't it be reasonable to assume a defensive head coach would result in a positive result for the defense? Quinn was also hired because of his network of league relationships. Wouldn't his wealth of contacts help in the accumulation of a quality coaching staff? Why is it we are now witnessing a purge of castoffs? It reminds me of a press conference when Ron Rivera was hired. He said that we would play the run on the way to the quarterback. The team rarely did. Rivera Del Rio was a union of 2 defensive-minded coaches, but their defenses were bad too. To be fair, there are complicating factors. In a vacuum, it seems reasonable that in an increasingly offensive-oriented league, our next head coach should be an offensive-minded head coach. Al, none of this makes sense. Feel free to bring some clarity to the situation. Thank you for the email, Rich. I talked about this on Wednesday's show, episode 1258, A Truth About the NFL is that defensive-minded head coaches do not necessarily have better defenses than offensive-minded head coaches have. 8 of the 10 head coaches for the top 10 teams in the NFL in total defense per DVOA for the 2025 regular season were head coaches with primarily offensive backgrounds, were offensive-minded head coaches. The idea that a defensive-minded head coach makes for a better defense is wrong. Washington has had a defensive-minded head coach for each of the last 6 seasons. Ron Rivera, 2020 through 2023. Dan Quinn, 2024 and 2025. And the defense has been bad in 4 of the 6 seasons. The only 2 good defenses were those for the 2020 and 2022 seasons. The 2021, 2023, 2024, and 2025 defenses were all bad to varying degrees. I hope that Dan Quinn wins multiple Super Bowls as Commanders head coach, but if he is fired sooner rather than later, it'll be interesting to see if the team finally goes back to having an offensive-minded head coach. But you know what's funny? So, yes, Washington has had a defensive-minded head coach for each of the last 6 seasons, but this stretch has followed the Redskins having an offensive-minded head coach for each of 18 consecutive seasons, 2002 through 2019. Steve Spurrier for the 2002 and 2003 seasons, Joe Gibbs for the 2004 through 2007 seasons, Jim Zorn for the 2008 and 2009 seasons, Mike Shanahan for the 2010 through 2013 seasons, Jay Gruden from January 2014 to October 2019, and Bill Callahan as interim head coach for the rest of that 2019 season. All of those guys, offensive-minded head coaches. And yet, so many of those offenses were bad. But there were plenty of reasons for that. Principal among them, the team's owner at the time, Dan Snyder. Well, what the Commanders now are doing, hopefully, will deliver long-term success. Short-term thinking does not deliver long-term results. Good process does. Science does, especially when it comes to skincare. And the best product for skincare is OneSkin. OneSkin formulas are powered by the OS1 peptide, a patented peptide built on longevity science proven to target aging at the cellular level. OneSkin supports the cellular repair that keeps your skin looking and feeling better as you get older. This is not about adding extra steps to your routine. No, this is about swapping in smarter ones. Born from over 10 years of longevity research, OneSkin's OS1 peptide is proven to target the cells that cause the visible signs of aging, helping you unlock your healthiest skin now and as you age. And for a limited time, OneSkin is making it even easier to stay consistent with up to 30% off your first 3 subscription orders when you use the promo code GALDY at oneskin.co/GALDY. That's oneskin.co/GALDY and use the promo code GALDY. oneskin.co/GALDY, up to 30% off with the promo code GALDY. And after your purchase, you'll be asked where you heard about OneSkin. Please support our show and say that Al Galdi sent you. So we on Tuesday afternoon had a press conference for Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn, had an introductory press conference for the team's new offensive coordinator David Blough, and had an introductory press conference for the team's new defensive coordinator Durante Jones. The combined length of the press conferences was about an hour and a half. A lot was said about a lot, but to me, nothing was more notable than both Quinn and Blough making it clear that the team is planning for more under-center snaps for quarterback Jayden Daniels. This clearly was part of the reason for the team on January 6th parting with offensive coordinator Cliff Kingsbury. We on Tuesday afternoon had this exchange between Commanders insider J.P. Finley of NBC4 and Dan Quinn.
Hey, Dan, you've talked about your vision, and it comes from you down to the coordinators. What is your vision for the offense, and kind of what's your role in implementing that vision for the offense?
Yeah, and it'll look different, JP, in some ways as we're still kind of building some of the things together. But this is going to be like an aggressive, balanced attack, but like that will probably have more under center than we have in the past. That's also for run action and play passes to generate explosive plays. And so we're going to try to feature every part of Jayden in the way that makes him unique and special. But also the run action and the runs and the play action game that goes with it. Those are all things to generate explosive plays. I think, as like David was speaking on earlier, when we're here a year from now and we talk about the generating the explosive plays, those are a few of the things that's going to come to mind when we're talking about our offense.
So, Dan Quinn on the Commanders' offense with David Blough as offensive coordinator versus with Cliff Kingsbury as offensive coordinator. Quote, it'll look different some, end quote. Dan Quinn, quote, will probably have more under center than we have in the past, end quote. Also, we on Tuesday afternoon had this exchange between David Aldridge of The Athletic and David Blough.
Hey, Coach. One thing Dan mentioned was that he anticipates Jayden will be under center a little bit more next year. I wonder why you thought that was important going forward.
Yeah, I think, it opens up, right, some different schemes in the run game, some things that I believe in. It opens up different play actions and keepers and getting them on the perimeter in different ways. I think there's a level of communication that happens under center. I think there's different ways to go about things, and it's something that I'm convicted about, that with his skill set, his fundamentals, the things that we absolutely loved about him when he first got here still ring true, and as we grow and develop. I think a lot of teams that you saw even playing deep into the playoffs. You know, it was something that was a foundation of what they did, and I think you know, that is something that we will like to implement with him and get him in that position.
Okay, now, as I have said, the whole under center versus shotgun/pistol debate can be overrated. Great offense in the NFL can happen in a variety of ways. Great offense in the NFL can happen via the quarterback being under center, can happen via the quarterback being in the shotgun, can happen via the quarterback being in the pistol. But the extent to which the Commanders under Cliff Kingsbury did not go under center is something. The Commanders for the 2025 regular season had an NFL low 17 under center dropbacks. For comparison's sake, the next lowest total was the Kansas City Chiefs' 45. So the Commanders had less than half of the next lowest total. Number one, in case you're curious, was the Los Angeles Rams. They, for the 2025 regular season, had an NFL high 251 under center dropbacks. And isn't it interesting that Cliff Kingsbury now reportedly is taking a job to be on the coaching staff of the Rams, working under head coach and former Redskins offensive coordinator Sean McVay. You wonder if Kingsbury, in being ported with by the Commanders and then not getting a head coaching or offensive play caller job, perhaps has realized that he does need to modify his ways. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Washington Commanders analyst and former Washington Redskins tight end Logan Paulsen. Logan was signed by the Skins as an undrafted free agent at a UCLA in April 2010. He was with the Skins for the 2010 through 2015 seasons. He then played for the Chicago Bears in the 2016 season, the San Francisco 49ers in the 2017 season, and the Atlanta Falcons in the 2018 season, during which the Falcons head coach was current Commanders head coach Dan Quinn. Logan now does a lot of great work for the Commanders on their website and on their YouTube channel. He also is the co-host of the Take Command podcast and is the co-host of the Drive to the Draft podcast. You can follow Logan on X at Logan Paulsen NFL, and Logan is joining us for the first of two conversations analyzing David Blough and Durante Jones. We, during this conversation, are focusing on the move to more under center snaps for Jayden Daniels. Hey, Logan, how are you?
I'm good, man. I really appreciate having me on, as always.
Yeah, really nice to talk to you. All right, under center. What do you think is behind the Commanders' desire for more under center snaps for Jayden Daniels?
Well, this is funny. Like, there's a million ways to skin a cat, and you can do it effectively in a multitude of ways. And I've always said this, and this is not a new take from me. If you want to do it from the gun, you can do it from the gun. If you want to do it from the pistol, you can do it from the pistol. If you want to do it from under center. But you have to think about what you're trying to accomplish and what you're trying to show the defense ultimately, right? I think that's where people get a little bit lost. So when you're under center, I take the snap, I turn my back to the defense, the ball is hidden. And so now you have to defend the run, you have to defend a boot, you have to defend a play action pass. And you think about the strain and stress that puts on the linebackers and the defensive line is tremendous, right? If you look at Miami, they do a lot of stuff from the gun where they're like motioning guys in orbit motioning guys across the face. They hide the football. It's the same stress on the linebacker. They just do it in a different way. I think under center just provides a great tool for an offense. And I think the other thing that I think is maybe more important is the marriage of formation. So like everything, like your runs should look like you should be throwing out of the formations you run the football out of and vice versa. And I think when you're under center, especially with the teams that do that more in the league, Seattle Seahawks being one that comes to mind, is they get in these condensed formations, they're under center, they throw the football out of those, right? It gives them an advantage because you have to defend the run as well. And so I just think marrying the concept to me is more of the issue here. Marrying the formations is more of the issue as opposed to strictly being under center.
If you're Jayden Daniels and so much of your football career has been playing out of the shotgun and pistol formations, how much of an adjustment will working more from under center be?
I mean, it's an adjustment, but I don't think you take a guy number 2 overall because you think he can't do something, right? You think he can do everything. And I think one of the things that stuck out to me about Jayden Daniels when he got here, specifically seeing him in person, is just how good his fundamentals are. David Blough mentioned this in the press conference, and I 1,000% agree. Like his ability to, 3-step, 5-step, 3 and a hitch, 3 and a hit, a 5 and a hitch from the gun. Like the different varieties that he brings, like his footwork's excellent, his release is excellent. Like this is just going to be a different, again, tool for him to add. And again, will it be different? Absolutely. But if I'm him, I'm also kind of excited because I look at what it's done for some of these quarterbacks who've had long journeys, the Jared Goffs, the Sam Darnolds. Like one of the benefits is like when we run the ball out on first down, it becomes much easier to throw the football on first down. The windows open up, the spacing's different, the read is simpler. And so if I'm him, I'm excited because he's been operating in this very high leverage, high decision making, tight window offense for 2 years now and been very successful. Here are some easy buttons for you that's going to make this a little bit more seamless in terms of offensive efficiency.
Does a quarterback see the field better out of the shotgun and pistol formations as compared to being under center, or not necessarily?
I think it depends on who you talk to. Some people say, like, I see it way better from the gun. I've heard quarterbacks say they don't like having to watch the snap into their hands because it takes their eyes from. It just depends, right? Some people like doing this drop from under center, but again, some people don't like it because the offensive line's right in your lap. So it really is just preference in my experience, right? Some guys are like, I love it from the gun, love it from the pistol. Other guys say I would rather, be under center. And so it really just depends on the individual. And I think it's like one of the things I think as a coach, and I think David Blough understands this, is just making it clear as to why you're doing it. We're not doing this to put you in a bad spot. We're doing this because we think it gives you an advantage, right? And we don't have to do it all the time, but this edge is important because it's going to make you a better football player.
An advantage of the shotgun and pistol formations over the under center formation is that the shotgun and pistol formations present the quarterback as a run threat more than the under center formation does, because it is out of the shotgun and pistol formations that you run the read option. Never mind whether you actually run the read option, just having an ultra mobile quarterback like Jayden Daniels in the shotgun or pistol makes the defense think that you might be running the read option. What do you make of this aspect of the Commanders having Daniels work more under center, that they are lessening him as a run threat?
I think that's a fantastic point. It's something that I think is going to be interesting to watch. The one thing I would say, and again, this comes from my background with Kyle Shanahan, is like when you're under center and you fake the run. Now I think back to like Jake the Snake when he was in Denver, right? The quarterback there. You are still a runner in the sense that now I can work a boot action, right? So now I fake the run, I boot, I move the pocket, I can still use my athleticism. Now we have a 3-level throw, I've broken the pocket. And you think about it, in some ways it puts the defense in a very similar conflict, right? Because that defensive end, that force player, the edge defender of the defense, he now needs to say, I need to make sure I carry out and defend Jayden Daniels on all of these fakes, because the one time I don't, he's going to be to the perimeter. We're going to be outflanked. He can run, he can throw, and he's put the defense in a really tough spot. So it's the same kind of idea as the zone read or the RPO, but it's just there's a different way to get to it from under center, and the mechanics are different. People don't categorize them the same way, but it puts a very similar stress on the defense.
We're talking with Washington Commanders analyst and former Washington Redskins tight end Logan Paulsen. We know RPOs, run-pass options, as being run out of the shotgun and pistol formations. Can RPOs be run from under center?
So there are like the variations of this. What I would call them, I'd characterize them a little bit differently. I'd call them like run alerts, for example, right? So a good example of this is like if you get an off coverage player while you're under center, that receiver is going to run a now slant. And so basically what you're reading, quote unquote, is the pre-snap spacing of the weak side linebacker in this example, right? So if he's a little bit tight, he's going to mirror the back as the back goes in the run action to the right here. And I feel like I can throw the snap. I can kind of take one step back and throw the slant. I think you've seen some of these opportunities. I think back to when I was in Atlanta, Matt Ryan was excellent at this. He understood kind of the spacing, how to get the ball to Mohamed Sanu or Julio Jones there. It's not really an RPO because you're not reading the movement of the linebacker post snap. You're kind of saying, based on the pre-snap alignment, this is where the ball should go. That's why I'm kind of characterizing as an alert as opposed to a RPO where you're actually reading the body language of the linebacker as the play is going on.
Do you think that David Blough wants Jayden Daniels running less or just running smarter?
I think, what the other thing this under center thing does is I think it just puts him in a better position to be more selective about running. Again, like, because one of the things is like when you're in the gun a lot, and they match concepts, those running lanes open up and you can make these decisions to scramble a little bit more reticently. And so what I do is I think this kind of forces him to stay in the pocket a little bit more and be a little bit more decisive with that first read throw. So to answer your question, I do think if I'm David Blough, I want him to be more selective about when he's running. But I also understand if I'm David Blough that I can impact that by how I call a game and what I'm asking him to do. Because there were times last year where I think Cliff's a really, really, really bright dude. I think he does some really innovative stuff from a football standpoint. But when you're in the gun and the first read is taken away and there's not really a threat of run from the running back, so the linebackers are getting all this grass, it's very enticing and inviting to run the football. Like I remember there'd be times where I'd pause the tape and be like, I'd run this ball, and I'm not a fast person just because of how the defense played this formation, played this concept. And so I think, like, again, getting him under center, working some play action stuff. This is a thing that I think is really underrated about Kevin O'Connell and Ben Johnson, and even Kyle Shanahan, is getting the first guy open for you, finding ways to get that open for you so the ball can come out of your hands. And again, alleviating some of that decision-making process for Jayden to say, like, oh, the play's dead, I have to run. No. Let's, as an offensive staff, on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, with our game plan, make sure the ball can get out where we want it to get out.
What do you think is changing for the Commanders' offensive line with not just David Blough now as offensive coordinator, but also Darnell Stapleton now as offensive line coach?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting. I think, one of the things about offensive line production is it's so tightly correlated to scheme. Obviously, you need good football players. But this scheme that David Blough is going to be bringing in, the Kevin O'Connell, Ben Johnson system, is notorious for insulating offensive linemen, making it easier, right? You have more guys in protection on first and second down because you got the play pass, the tight end in the back will stay in. We can work slide protections where I'm not on an island as much. And so I do think you're going to see just from a schematic standpoint, an improvement in the offensive line. And with regards to Stapleton, I think he is a very bright dude. I think he's really good with techniques. I think the guys respect him. So I think it's going to work out really well as long as he and Blough are on the same page with how to deleverage that group, which has been a characteristic of this offense, throughout the NFL. Kyle, Sean, Ben Johnson, name your coordinator that runs this variation of the offense. And I think you'll see a much improved group.
All right, Washington Commanders analyst and former Washington Redskins tight end Logan Paulsen. Logan, thanks. All the best.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right. Hey, if you have a case, contact the NACE Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers. If you feel that you've been wronged, if you think that you've been wronged but aren't sure, contact the NACE Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers, and mention that Al Galdi sent you. You could call 202-902-7611. You could also visit Washington, D.C., injurylawyers.com, and submit for a free, no-obligation case review. The NACE Law Group features compassionate lawyers and zealous advocates for its clients, led by the great Chris Nace and founded in 1979. The Nace Law Group is a Washington, D.C.-based family law firm that handles medical malpractice, personal injury, birth injury, legal malpractice, and consumer protection cases, offering aggressive advocacy for victims in Washington, D.C. and West Virginia. The Nace Law Group is outstanding. It will fight for you and your family. The Nace Law Group has recovered millions of dollars for the sick and injured. If you have a case, contact the NACE Law Group. Call 202-902-7611 or visit Washington, D.C., injurylawyers.com and tell the NACE Law Group that Al Galdi sent you. The NACE Law Group, Accident and Injury Lawyers. Well, some unfortunate Washington Wizards news on Thursday morning. The team on Thursday morning announced that Alex Sarr is expected to be out for approximately 2 weeks due to a right hamstring strain, and so he is not participating in the tournament-style Rising Stars Challenge on Friday night as part of 2026 NBA All-Star Weekend, which is happening at the home of the Los Angeles Clippers, the Intuit Dome in L.A., over Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. The Wizards, for a second consecutive season, had 3 players selected to the Rising Stars roster. Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, and Trae Johnson were selected to the 2026 Rising Stars roster, but the number now is 4. The NBA late Thursday morning announced that the Wizards' Bub Carrington has been added to the Rising Stars roster to replace Alex Sarr. So 4 Wizards players have been selected to the 2026 Rising Stars roster. Last season, Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, and Bub Carrington were selected to the 2025 Rising Stars roster. And so here we are at the All-Star break. Our Wizards in the NBA's 2025-2026 regular season are 14-39, second worst record in the NBA. This is season number 3 for the Wizards as a rebuilding and tanking team. And the tank this season is especially important given the desire/need for them to keep their reported top 8 protected first-round pick in the perceived to be loaded 2026 NBA draft. But this does appear to be the final season of the tank, as the Wizards this season have made 2 big in-season trades. The Wizards on January 9th announced having traded C.J. McCollum and Corey Kispert to the Atlanta Hawks for Trae Young, and the Wizards on February 5th, what was 2026 NBA trade deadline day, announced having acquired Anthony Davis in a 3-team trade with the Dallas Mavericks and Charlotte Hornets. Monumental Sports and Entertainment founder and CEO Ted Leonsis, he on May 25th, 2023, announced that Michael Winger had been named president of Monumental Basketball. And then the Wizards on June 8th, 2023, announced the hirings of Will Dawkins as general manager and Travis Schlenk as senior vice president of player personnel, and announced the promotion of John Thompson III to senior vice president of Monumental Basketball. And this regime, in my opinion, has the Wizards on the right path. I am pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast, Greg Finberg, staff editor for Bullets Forever and the host of the Wizards podcast. You can follow Greg on X at Greg Finberg. Greg puts out a lot of great content on the Wizards. Hey, Greg, how are you?
Yeah, thanks for the warm introduction, Al. Always nice to be here and join you to talk some Wizards basketball. I've been doing great. You know, the Wizards are one of the teams that aren't really trying to win, and the last 29 games are not really going to be a sprint to the finish line. It's going to be like a slow crawl through like thick mud to the finish line. But it's going to be exciting to maybe see some of the younger guys like Will Riley, who's been playing well, and some other rookies and second-year guys that are going to get more playing time and more experience as they rest some of the guys that they just acquired. So it's not going to be great wins-wise, but I think there's certainly some stuff to definitely look for, and I'm sure we'll dive into it today.
Is it correct to say that the Wizards rebuild is working? Not that it has worked, because there's still a lot to be determined, but that the rebuild is working, that at this moment in time, the rebuild is going as we more or less would want it to go?
I think so. I think it's a very good question. I mean, they're done their deconstruction phase. That's what president of Monumental Basketball, Michael Winger, said after the Trae Young trade, and he kind of doubled down after that Anthony Davis trade. I mean, there's one holdover from the time that they took over in June of 2023, and they being the new front office. That's Anthony Gill, who's only really here because he's a good veteran to have, and I don't know if he'll even be here next year if they'll give him a roster spot. But they've completely overhauled. They completely turned this roster around. And they've done so by drafting really well. I mean, you can't really look at any of the draft picks that they've made and say, hey, this guy isn't going to work out. They all have really good traits and really good qualities. They're all within 21, 22 years old for the most part, and they're all showing at least some semblance of, okay, this is why I was drafted here. Even Jamir Watkins, their second-round pick this year, just had a career-high 16 points in their loss to the Cavs. He's been pretty good on the defensive end as well. You obviously have Alex Sarr, who's one of 3 players in the league, I think, averaging 17 points, 7 boards, and 2 blocks. Led the league in blocks for a time. I think he trails Wemby now. Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, Trae Johnson, they've all had flashes. So the guys that you drafted, Bilal Coulibaly as well, they've all showcased that they can be something. And now you're adding in some pretty good quality veterans. And now those guys haven't played yet for the team. They're injury-prone guys. They're both recovering from injuries. And they're guys in their career that, yeah, they've been pretty good, but have they been the top guys on teams that can contend? And Trae Young led his team to the conference final, but no further. Anthony Davis obviously won the finals, but could he do that without LeBron? And so there's still question marks surrounding this team. And so I think you put it pretty perfectly. To this point, they've done a really good job. Will Dawkins, Michael Winger, they've done a great job. They're at a point next year, I think, where they can contend, and they have all of their future picks, all of these extra assets, second-round picks, etc., that they can move forward with and make some more moves with. But they still haven't won. And so that's the next step is like, yeah, you've done all of these things right, but is it going to translate to winning basketball games when you're trying to win? And I think that's the next step, and I think you'll see them at least try to make that step next year.
The Wizards, of course, are tanking for the rest of this season, but if in fact the tanking ends with this season and the team truly tries to win next season, what do you think this team can realistically be next season?
I mean, I think that they can definitely sniff the play-in tournament. I mean, I even think if they were trying to win games this season, that they could be pretty close. We saw that stretch where they went, 7-5 in 12 games. They went 4-1 over a 5-game stretch at a point. Like when they're trying to win, when they're healthy, even without Davis and without Trae Young, they were a pretty competent basketball team. Now, that's not the case for most of the season because they're not trying to win games. But I think play-in is definitely feasible. I think a top 6 seed would be overachieving in that year. And I think that's why the front office hasn't put any type of labels on, okay, we're going to compete next year. I think next year is a feel it out year. Like we have AD, we have Trae Young. We'll hopefully have them healthy. We have our young core, and you got to hope you have a top pick this year in the lottery. And you sort of do what OKC did the year before they won the title. It's like, we're going to go for it and we're going to try and see what we have. And then OKC was able to say, hey, look, we need some help down low for Chet. Let's go get Hartenstein to be that rebounder and screen setter. We also need some perimeter defense. We need a guy that can space the floor. We need someone who can also be a good on-ball defender next to Lou Dort. Let's go out and let's get Caruso. And in doing so, they traded Josh Giddey, one of their premier players. But the Wizards also have the ability to do so with so many draft picks. And so I think next year is a year where, and again, OKC got the 1 seed that year. And I doubt that's what the Wiz will do next year. But it seems to me it's like, you guys go ahead. There's no limit on what you can do. We're going to probably retain Brian Keefe at least for next year, and let's see how much you can win. And then we'll see what holes we'll see what gets exposed, and we'll see what we need to do in the future. They'll have all their picks. They'll have a bunch of young players that they might want to trade, and they can sort of go and really contend the following year. But I think 5 or 6 seed next year would be awesome. And I think play-in tournament would be pretty feasible for this team, especially if they're trying to win.
You and I are on the same page with the Wizards trades for Trae Young and Anthony Davis. These were low-cost, high-upside trades in terms of what the Wizards gave up. Now, Young and Davis are not low-cost players. Each guy is a mega-money player. A lot of talk about the Wizards potentially signing each guy to a contract extension. Do you believe that the Wizards will sign each guy to a contract extension? Do you believe that the Wizards should sign each guy to a contract extension?
I think it's a different answer for each player. I think when you talk about Trae Young, they acquired him obviously pretty much for nothing. You see CJ McCollum expiring contract that you traded Jordan Poole to get. And then Corey Kispert, who again wasn't drafted by the front office, is a solid player on a solid contract. But again, you would take Trae Young over Corey Kispert 10 days out of 10. And so you didn't give up too much to get him, but he has, a $49 million player option for next season. And I think if you're the Wizards, you acquired him for a reason. You clearly value his skill set. You needed a point guard first and foremost, and you get that in Trae Young. If I'm the Wizards, I would give him, a 2-year extension this offseason to where it's like, hey, don't pick up the player option. We can give you an additional year for next year guaranteed, and then you can tack on a player option for the following season. You can just say, hey, we want to have this contract structured to a point where we're comfortable with it if you're going to opt in next year, and we want to just extend. They did the same thing with Bradley Beal a couple years ago before the Supermax, where they gave him like a 2-year extension with the player option that he eventually declined to sign the Supermax. And so I think that's smart for the Wizards. If they're going to bring Trae Young back, you just traded for him. I think they'd want him under contract. For Anthony Davis, he's 32 years old. He's been one of the most injury-prone players in the league. I think he's played 75 games one time in his career. He's always injured. And I think he gets a lot more flack for it than he probably deserves because there's been times where he has been healthy. But the last 2 years, especially between LA and Dallas, has not been his healthiest years. When he is healthy, he's a pretty easy 20-10 guy, great rim protector. And so that makes sense to want him on your team. But he's under contract next year for a lot of money. I think 55 or 56 million, or 58 actually for next year. And then the following year, $62.7 million player option, which is hefty. And so if you're the Wizards, those 2 years of him under contract, because I guarantee he'll pick up the option, that's all you need. You need 1 to 2 years with him and Trae Young. And then your extensions will start to kick in with your young players. You want to sign some other free agents. And the best part, I think, about those 2 trades is you're not locked in to these long-term deals. It's not like you just traded for Bradley Beal and you got to pay him 4 more years at $50 million and you can't do anything about it. You have some leeway here where you're not locked in. And I think that was one of my favorite parts of the trade. So I'm fine giving Trae Young an extension. He hasn't been as injury prone as Anthony Davis. He's 4 years younger. and he's got a way different contract structure-wise to where an extension actually makes sense for him and for the Wizards. But for Anthony Davis, you have 2 more years at 58 and 62 million. It's probably more than he should be making based on how much he plays. And if you're the Wizards, why would you put yourself into when Anthony Davis is 34, 35 years old, then the extension will kick in and he'll get another 3 years? It doesn't make too much sense to me. So I'd extend Trae Young, but I wouldn't do it for AD.
Yeah, the extent to which Anthony Davis in his NBA career has missed games due to injury is staggering, and it will never not crack me up that Charles Barkley calls Davis street clothes. This was Barkley during his time as an NBA analyst for TNT.
They can't win this series without street clothes. I call him Anthony Street Clothes Davis because he's always in street clothes.
Yeah, Anthony Street Clothes Davis. How great is that? Neither Trae Young nor Anthony Davis has played in a game since being acquired by the Wizards. Do you expect either guy to play again this season?
I think Trae Young, yes. It's hard because like you have the tanking stuff and like the Jazz just listed Markkanen as out for last night's game with rest, and then the next hour he was upgraded to available. I don't know if the league was like, hey guys, come on, like we can't allow you to do stuff this egregious. But the Wizards clearly have shown that they have no interest in trying to hide the fact that they want to keep their top 8 pick. They need a bottom 4 record to do so. At the moment, they have 14 wins. They're the only team to have that low win total apart from Sacramento, and then a couple other teams with 15 wins. So 2 wins back to back. And if the season ended, Washington wouldn't keep their pick, or at least wouldn't guarantee themselves that they keep their pick. And that's the main goal. Trae Young and Anthony Davis don't help them towards that goal. They're good. And I think they would help this team win. But Trae Young was gearing up to return before he got traded to Washington. He had a quad contusion. He had an MCL sprain from earlier in the year. And so, I don't know how much longer the Wizards can continue to hold him out with this without the league stepping in and being like, guys, he's healthy. Come on. So I think you'll see maybe a 5 to 6 game stretch from Trae Young. I do know that the Wizards sometime in early March have a stretch where they play like a gauntlet schedule. They'll play like OKC and Phoenix and some other really good teams. It would make sense for them to bring Trae back, I think, then, where it's like, hey, we're playing him, but you're going to probably lose those games regardless. I think that would make sense. And it's sad to even be thinking about it like this, but I know the Wizards are probably thinking about it like this because they've been very strategic in how they've been tanking. And then you have Anthony Davis, who was reported, Shams reported he was going to be out for the season and he was going to get surgery. And then he changed the report and said he's not going to get surgery. And I've been told that like he wanted to stay healthy in case he came back and Kyrie came back. And obviously before he was blindsided by this trade to Washington. And so I'm sure his plans changed drastically. Will Dawkins said he expects him to play this year, but he also kind of hid behind the fact that he has a doctor's appointment, an important one over the All-Star break. It wouldn't surprise me if he's like, hey guys, we wanted him to play, but he had this doctor's appointment and we're going to go ahead and get that surgery and he's going to miss the rest of the season. I mean, Chris Haynes reported that. And I think Chris Haynes, a lot of his reporting comes from Rich Paul, who's the agent of Anthony Davis. So I would expect Trae Young to play this season. I actually think Will Dawkins is being honest about that. But when it comes to Anthony Davis, like for both sides, just like if he gets surgery, he's out for the year. I think that's just the best case scenario. And you give him, 6 to 7 months to just recover and be healthy for October while you guys tank and lose games. That makes the most sense to me.
Much more with Greg Finberg in moments, but if you happen to be listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can write a review of the podcast saying that you like it. The review can be just a sentence or 2, but the reviews help out the podcast a lot. Thank you for doing them.
This is Steve Smith here, former NFL wide receiver and host of the 89 Show on YouTube. In my day, I'd go up against defenders twice my size and wasn't afraid of getting hit. But one thing terrified me. People learning I had a mental health issue. I thought I'll seem weak, but being open about your struggles isn't weak. It's the only way to overcome them. That's where BetterHelp Online Therapy comes in. Visit BetterHelp.com/radio, BetterHelp.com/radio to get started. BetterHelp.com/radio.
More now with Greg Finberg, staff editor for Bullets Forever and the host of the Wizards podcast. For all of the talk about Trae Young and Anthony Davis, the number one reason for optimism with the Wizards is what we talked about earlier. They're drafting. This team, off years of terrible drafting, appears to be doing a much better job of drafting and now has this nice nucleus of promising young players. Leading the way is Alex Sarr. He is having a breakout season, is far from a finished product. What we have wondered is whether any of the Wizards' many draft picks under Michael Winger and Will Dawkins will turn out to be a superstar. Can Alex Sarr be a superstar?
I think he's definitely the piece that they've been building around. I think a lot of the moves that they made, the Trae Young move especially, is one that helps Alex Sarr by far the most. I mean, Trae Young got Clint Capella paid $50+ million, and Clint Capella has done nothing since Trae Young has left, and since he left to Houston for a second stint there. I think a lot of the moves that you've seen them make and will make in the future is going to be like, how does this affect our team? But how does this help Alex? How does this help our centerpiece? Now, Alex isn't a number one option. It's hard for centers and forwards to be number one options because he just doesn't have the ball in his hands as much. But you've seen this year in the short roll, he's been way better passing wise. When he's rolling to the basket, he's finishing around the rim. He's gone from 39% field goal percentage last year to above 50% this year. I think he's up from 30% three-point percentage to about 35%. So he's more efficient in multiple areas. And the rim protection's gotten even better. I don't know if he still leads the league in blocks. If he doesn't, then he's a close second. And it's not really fair because Wemby is just, again, not a fair player. But you see the rim protection, you see the offense sort of blossoming. So is he this number one option that you wouldn't go to when the game's on the line? I doubt it. He's not that type of offensive player. But his rim protection is elite. It's top 5, top 10 already in the league. And he's only in year 2. He's only 20 years old. And obviously he's only going to get better. So I think, is he a number one option? No. I think they definitely need to get that true number one. And they have it in Trae Young and AD. And maybe if they draft one. But I certainly think out of all the draft picks, he's the best. He has the most upside. And he's the one that they've sort of been building this whole thing around, barring the fact that they really don't know what pick they'll get this year. But he's been fantastic. He's definitely exceeded expectations, especially after that summer league game where he went 0-15. Yet a lot of people were comparing him to Kwame Brown. A lot of people were calling him a bust after one game in summer league. He's obviously put those things to bed. He's been great this year.
Given the financial realities of the current apron-laden NBA, does a team have to have a superstar, a truly elite player, to contend?
I think so. I think it's a lot of time, like when the game gets tough, like you want to have that guy that you go to. You want to have the guy that when you're down, you can just sort of ride him towards the end. I don't think it's as necessary as it was when like the Big Three era, when like LeBron had teamed up with Wade and Bosh. You had a great team out in San Antonio. Like I think if you have one superstar and you really build a good team around him, you can win a title. But if you look at the last couple of champions, the Thunder had the MVP in Shea. The Celtics had Tatum, who again is phenomenal. The Nuggets had Jokic. The Warriors obviously have Steph and other Hall of Famers. The Bucks have Giannis. The Lakers have LeBron. Toronto had Kawhi during that great run, and then you had the Cavs championships and the Warriors championships. So yes, it is based on the last couple of champions over the last decade. You do need a superstar. But I don't think it's just because that's how you'll get over the hump. I think they're the ones that get you there. They're the ones in the playoffs that sort of take those shots. They're the ones that when you're down, they're the ones that bring you back in the game. I don't think it's as essential as it used to be, but I think if you're Washington, you look at your roster right now, not counting Trae Young, not counting Anthony Davis, do you have that guy that can go get you a bucket? Maybe in 2-3 years if you allow Keyshawn to develop, but I just don't see that right now. And so that's why this draft is so big, because there are guys in this class, multiple of them, that can be that number one option for you. It's just a matter of, you got to get lucky. The Spurs just released Jeremy Sohan, who they drafted top 10. They took Josh Primo in the lottery the year earlier. They drafted awful. They just got lucky with Wemby. And sometimes you just got to get lucky with a guy that can change your entire franchise. And so maybe the Wizards are hoping that that's the case, because they can only draft, you mentioned, they've drafted really well, but they haven't done it with number one picks. They've done it with lottery picks, and Keyshawn George and Will Riley were in the 20s. Like, you can draft as well as you want, but if you don't have the number one option, it's going to be pretty tough, I think, to win a title.
I, for much of this season, have defined the Wizards' nucleus of promising young players as five guys: Bilal Coulibaly, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bub Carrington, and Trae Johnson. Should that nucleus be expanded to six, given the rise of Will Riley?
I think so. I mean, the stretch that he just went on was pretty phenomenal. And he just turned 20 years old. He's 6'9" at 20 years old, which he's still growing. I think when they drafted him, he was about 6'7". Needs to add some weight, certainly. But his ability to score from all three levels at the age and stage of his career that he's at is way farther along than I thought. He can score around the rim. He's got really good footwork in terms of pivoting and getting into the mid-range. He's got a float game, but he can also step outside and knock down the three at a pretty good clip. And when Trae Young is back, and when he has an actual point guard, he's not going to have to do as much on ball, but he can. Like he said all along, he's a point guard. The Wizards said he can play point guard. If you have this 6'9" point guard coming off your bench that can really make things happen for the rest of your team, it allows Bub Carrington to come off the bench and be a combo guard and a scorer, and that's more, I think, suitable to him. Like that opens up a lot for you. My favorite part about Will Riley is the Wizards had the 18th pick, and they traded back 3 spots with Utah because Utah wanted Walter Clayton. And in that move, they picked up Will Riley, who I'm sure they would have still drafted at 21. And they picked up 3 additional second-round picks. One of those picks became Jamir Watkins, who just had a career high and is looking like a really good 3-and-D option for the future. And you still have 2 extra second-round picks. And obviously the Utah Jazz just traded Walter Clayton. And it's all these little mini moves that Will Dawkins has made that showcases that he is definitely a step above other GMs like Tommy Shepard that the Wizards have had in the past, but certainly with Will Riley stepping up. And that's the best part about tanking, I think, is like it sucks to lose these games, but you're never going to see Will Riley play 45 minutes and score 27 points in a game for a while. And he just did that against the Nets.
And I got to tell you, I have no patience for the people complaining about the Wizards tanking. And I'm not talking about Wizards fans who are complaining about the team tanking. I'm talking about fans of other teams and NBA observers complaining about the Wizards tanking, that they are tanking in too blatant of a way. So what? They're doing exactly what they should be doing. They're doing exactly what NBA rules allow. The Wizards are doing what they should have done years ago. And right now, it's working.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said, don't hate the player, hate the game when it comes to tanking. Get mad at the league if you want, but Utah and Washington have picks to protect. They have top 8 protected picks. They're going to do everything. There's no incentive for them to win anymore. They're not trying to win games. They made trades at the deadline to compete next year. Utah went out and got Jaren, and they could win games if they tried, but they don't. What does that do for them? They know that it's better percentage wise in the new lottery system to have the worst possible record because it limits how far you can fall, and they can't fall outside the top 8 or they lose their draft pick in a really good class. Adam Silver has showed that he really won't do much to intervene. And so if you're a team like Brooklyn, I've seen a lot of Brooklyn Nets fans complaining on the timeline because they're high and mighty, we're not going to tank. It's just you're hurting yourself. These teams are tanking, and if the league's not going to do anything about it, then why are you getting mad at those teams? Get mad at the league because there's not enough regulation to put a cap on the tanking.
The Wizards used to be the team saying that it wasn't going to tank, and look at where that got our team. Final question. Wizards head coach Brian Keefe, should he be the team's head coach when it transitions from tanking to trying to win?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question just because, you've seen it in the past where they have kept that coach for a little bit. You saw with Brett Brown, and that turned out to sort of be a disaster where they made the playoffs because they had a good and better roster, but they couldn't get over that hump, and he certainly wasn't the guy to do so. You saw it work out, though, with Mark Daigneault in OKC where, he led them through the rebuild and then just led them to a title last year. I don't think the success has been there for the Wizards like you saw early with OKC. They just haven't been as competitive as you'd like them to be in a lot of these games. But I also think it's unfair to Brian Keefe because I think the last 3 years you can make an argument the Wizards have had the worst roster in the NBA, pretty easily. And especially with all the young players, you have Brian Keefe who's being told to focus more on development than wins and losses. You have Brian Keefe who's being told, hey, don't play your starters for most of the second half so that we can lose these games. And so that's pretty unfair, I think, to evaluate him on that. And if I'm the Wizards, I feel like you give him one more year. I feel like you give him next year and you say, hey, you go and do whatever you can. This is the first time since you've been head coach that you're trying to win games. Go ahead and do it. And so I think they'll give him another year and they'll see what he can do, and with a good roster, the best that he's had. But then they'll reevaluate. Like, is he the guy to? I think he's a great player development coach, but there's been times late in games where he's messed up. Like, there was a time earlier in the year where one possession game, 30 seconds left, and he told Keyshawn George to foul. And he admitted that was his mistake. But in the NBA, like, you can't make those mistakes. You got to know time and possession. And there's been other instances across the 2.5 years he's been here where you sort of scratch your head and be like, you've called 5 timeouts in a quarter and nothing has happened. Is the team not listening to you? Are you not able to adjust? And so I would probably wager that he's not the guy to lead them into the future. But I think he at least deserves the opportunity to do so. And I think the Wizards probably feel the same way. And so I think they'll give him a year and they'll see what he can do and maybe reevaluate. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be championship coaches that are available. Mike Malone is right there. I know some Wizards fans have wanted him. Sam Cassell, who used to be on the staff, he deserves an opportunity. He's in Boston now. Like, there are coaches you could hire if you fire Brian Keefe. But I just think both sides probably feel it's best to give him at least an opportunity to move forward with this team.
All right, Greg Finberg, staff editor for Bullets Forever and the host of the Wizards podcast. Greg, thanks. Have a nice weekend.
Always a nice time coming on here. Pleasure to always be with you, Al. Thanks for having me on.
And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Monday show, episode 1261. We'll have a lot for you on the Washington Commanders. Also on Monday's show, I'll talk college basketball, which this weekend includes Maryland at Rutgers, Sunday at noon. Georgetown at number 6 UConn, Saturday night at 8. Number 15 Virginia versus Ohio State at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville, Tennessee in the Nashville Hoop Showdown on Saturday night at 8. Virginia Tech home to Florida State Saturday afternoon at 2. George Mason at George Washington Friday night at 7. And VCU at Richmond Saturday evening at 6. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you on Monday.
They can't win this series without street clothes. I call him Anthony Street Clothes Davis because he's always in street clothes.